Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant, John Solider. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, folks, hey, as promised, round two with Ben Warren. And boy, this is going to be fun because we're talking about a new project for Ben. It's completed. It's about to come out, and it's Pluck the FUD. And we kind of fooled everybody a little bit on our last interview about Pluck the FUD. And it's such a funny name. So, Ben, let's just start out and talk about what is Pluck the FUD?
So Pluck the FUD, here's the thing. When growing a garden, I'm going to ask you all a rhetorical question. When growing a garden, what's going to creep into the garden?
Weeds.
And pests maybe, but weeds are going to creep into that garden. And what you've got to do, you've got to get in, you've got to pluck the weeds out of the garden. And, if you don't, there's three major things the weeds will do. They'll steal the nutrients from what you're trying to grow. They'll take up space. And they'll wrap their roots around your intended plant. And so you got to get rid of the weeds, right? Now, listen, our minds are the exact same. We may have this beautiful idea plant, like I'm going to double my team sales in the next 180 days. And inevitably, or whatever it is, whatever goal it is, your dream you're pursuing, inevitably, weeds of the mind, weeds are going to creep in. And they show up in forms and three major weeds we all experience: fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD. So you've got to pluck the FUD. You got to get rid of those weeds. You got to get them the heck out of your brain.
And what is the due date of your new baby, Pluck the FUD?
So Pluck the FUD, the first launch of the digital book comes out June 16th. And our goal was to have all of the books. There's been so many supply chain struggles, and this is real life in business, right? Where things don't always work out. So the supply chain is off a little bit. So mid-July is when the physical copy of the book will be here.
Well, what's great about that, Ben, is our listeners, hey, by the time you're hearing this, it'll either be out or it'll be about to be out. And so digital, so Amazon digital?
Yeah, Kindle version.
Kindle? Okay, yeah. Great. So, Ben, let's stay on that for a minute, okay? As we were preparing to do these interviews, we talked for the first time probably 4 to 6 weeks before we finally got to interview. And if you don't mind sharing, you've had some Pluck the FUD stuff. You've had some Buffalo moments where you've had to rush into the storm, and you've had some Eat the Frog moments. Why don't you share that? Because, everybody thinks guys like you and even guys like me that we have these perfect lives. Nothing goes wrong. We get up in the morning and our wives are playing violins and making us breakfast and nothing ever happens, and we don't get flat tires and we don't run out of gas and, all the other stuff that sometimes people think if you're a little bit successful doesn't happen to you. You've had, my friend, about as much as one human being can take. But if you don't mind, share some of what's happened between now and where we started talking versus here we are today.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. And keeping it real between us, so John and I have canceled and pushed this meeting 3 different times. And this is our 4th time where we've had it on the calendar. And the first time, literally the day that I found out that I had melanoma and it's spread, was our first meeting. And I'm just like, John, sorry. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. And since then I've had surgery. They pulled out a big chunk out of my back. And then they pulled 8 lymph nodes out of my armpit. And we had scheduled 2 weeks from that first one, we scheduled 2 weeks later. And I figured after surgery, I'd be good to jump on with you. And my wife had to text you and be like, Ben is crazy. He always underestimates everything. And he's laid up, like drugged out. He just got out of 2.5 hours of anesthesiologist and anesthesia, whatever you call it. And so my wife luckily was clear enough on my schedule to know to call you and let you know. So we rescheduled. And then, we were scheduled a couple weeks after that. I've been sick and actually legit right now. I'm sitting here with a positive COVID test, hacking my brains out a little bit. But you know what? I'm just like, no, I'm not going to reschedule. And I know you'd be fine with it because you're just a champion and you get life. But like, no, we can do this. And so that's life, right? So I'm dealing with some of that stuff right now, John.
Wow. Well, thank you. And most importantly, good health. And you're in my prayers. I know everybody else as well. I know you got a young family and young kids and everything. So I'm sure you're going to be great, because here's the thing too, because you and I are obviously not only writers of books, but we read a lot, right? The attitude, it determines so much. So let's go back. Okay. Brian Tracy, your mentor. Man, I got great respect for it. Everybody else on this phone or video should. Okay. Brian Tracy says about Pluck the FUD that this book, this is Brian Tracy talking, folks. Brian Tracy, man's written 80 books. He's spoken to millions of people on every continent in the world. Brian Tracy says this book will change your life forever. Brian Tracy says that. So let's talk about Pluck the FUD a little more. Let's tease him. Because once again, folks, buy the book, okay? Invest in yourself. We started this interview on July 5th talking about, the great Ben Franklin, right? Renaissance man that he was, talking about invest the coins in your purse, in your mind, and your mind will refill your purse. Pluck the FUD should be in your library. I know it's going to be in mine when it gets out, okay? So Ben, tease him a little bit. Give him a couple of more Pluck the FUDs. I'm really careful how I'm saying that. and my kids are almost adults, so I'm.
Oh, that's so funny. People ask me all the time, they're like, have you ever messed up on stage and said the wrong words? And I'm just like, so far, no. And I hope not. I hope I don't ever. And, oftentimes, it's a big pattern interrupt. Like when you said what? And that pattern interrupt is part of the power in Pluck the FUD. Because you gotta get rid of the weeds. In fact, I'll share screen on actual manuscript right here that I sent in to my publisher. And there's the picture of it. And you've got all this stuff. So you've got the weeds, the leaves, the clouds, you've got you see some ants, ants, that's one of the chapters. Annihilate the ants. And we'll talk about, you've got the buffalo right here, right? The buffalo we talked about in our last episode of charging straight into the storm. We talked about the frog. You got to eat the frog. And so to get rid of the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, you gotta get in and pluck it. And it takes action. It takes action to do that. And something kind of fun, I'll tease you a little bit. Check this out. So we've got, there's a QR code. And in fact, if you're watching this, you can scan this right now. There's a QR code linking to video, to resources. And this is a free workbook and worksheet that you can get. But even cooler than that, check this out. At the end of every chapter, there's a QR code that scans to a video. So this chapter is called Weeds of the Mind. And there's a QR code that'll link you to a video to go deeper into Weeds of the Mind, where I teach the principles just in a living room chat with you. And so every chapter, at the end of every chapter, you'll see don't fertilize the FUD. And there's a video that you can take and watch. And so there's tons of resources in the book. Every chapter has that there. And, you mentioned Brian Tracy. So something that Brian told me, one of the first times I met him, this was maybe, this exact experience was maybe, I think like 16 years ago. He came to our mastermind 15 years ago. So it was about a year before that. And I picked him up from the airport. I was the number one sales leader at our organization, and he was coming to speak at our event. And so I got to pick him up. I went to dinner with him and the owner of my company, Wright Thurston, and we we went and we took him out. And also a friend of ours, Jared Taggart, was a top sales leader there. And anyways, driving Brian home, I got the chance to drive him to his hotel. It wasn't his house. And I took him, and as he was getting out of his car, I was like, Brian, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah, sure thing. And I said, Brian, of all the things that you've learned over the years, what's your biggest piece of advice? I mean, you've written tons and tons and dozens of best-selling books at that time. He's, spoken all over the world. And I just said, what's the number one advice? I've read so many of his books and I just had so much respect for him. And I'll never forget, John, what he said. He looked me in the eye and he stopped. I won't forget because he stopped opening this door and he just kind of looked at me and he's like, there's two. And I'm like all ears. I'm like looking around for a pen. I'm in my car and I'm like, and I didn't have one right there handy. And so I'm just like getting ready to take major mental notes. And he said, the first thing that I would tell you is to continue to learn. He says, if you'll continue to learn, if you'll commit to continuous learning and improvement, you will continue to learn and improve in the areas that you're working towards. And that will emerge you up towards the top. Just continue to learn, keep learning. And I mean, I'd heard that before, hey, keep learning, Kaizen, continuous learning, all that stuff. But coming from my hero, it brought a new weight and a new gravity to how important that fundamental is to continue learning. And since that day, I've been on this just insatiable journey to continue to learn and continue to grow. And the second thing he told me, John, was don't quit. He said, of all the things I've learned, like Winston Churchill talks about KBO, keep buggering on. Don't quit. Don't quit. Keep going. And when you feel justified in quitting, when the world around you tells you, you should quit and you're okay, and you just quit. It's okay. You've done everything you can do. Keep going. He says, those two things, if you continue to learn and don't quit, man, that is the recipe for massive success.
And by the way, folks, just if you're watching, okay, and you can't see my notes, but there's my notes that will be transformed to one of my little yellow stickies because I ran out of little yellow stickies. But this is the type of stuff that when you listen to Ben and you listen to some of our other speakers that we've interviewed in the past and ones that we'll interview in the coming months and years, take these notes. Because as Ben can tell you, and Brian Tracy can tell you, and Tom Hopkins can tell you, and we could go through the list. The late Bob Proctor could tell you, and the late Jim Rohn could tell you, okay? What would all these guys tell you? The same thing. Once those notes go here, that's not Ben's notes, that's not Brian's notes, that's John's notes, okay? That's why you listen with a pen, and you always take notes and make them your own. Because the other thing, and comment on this if you would, because you understand the science of this stuff, okay? When you take notes, what happens when that pen moves? What does it do to the brain?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It triggers the brain. It triggers as you're putting that in, you're engaging your reticular activating system, which starts engaging what you start to focus on. When you start writing down goals, you start writing things down. It gets motion comes from emotion, right? We get into motion and it ignites our emotion and we get going, and it triggers key pieces of our brain that bring into our life things that are meaningful and important to us.
Because the other thing is this, what Ben just said there, quoting Brian Tracy, right? Continue to learn and don't quit. Really easy, right? I interviewed another guy named Ben a few months ago, Ben Gay III, okay?
Oh, he's amazing. I love him.
Great guy. Doesn't live too far from you there. Anyway, and I said to him, because, he was the last guy mentored by Dr. Napoleon Hill, right? And, Hill was about 80 years old and Ben was in his 20s. I said, what 3 things did he teach you of all else in 2 years? He said, integrity, focus, and action. And the only reason why my memory is so good on that is because I wrote it down and I'm looking at it right here on one of my little yellow stickies, right? Because this stuff, folks, this is life-changing stuff. Ben, let's go back to that. Let me ask you a question. You've learned a lot from Brian. You've learned a lot from doing, right? Which is the greatest teacher of all, is doing anything, okay? What are the 3 things let me set the table for you a little bit. Somebody sitting out there listening to us, right? You're very successful. You got a great life. Okay. You got a little obstacle going on right now, right? That you referenced a few minutes ago. I got a great life too, folks. Okay. You know what I mean? Like Ben and I are both blessed, but people listen to us that aren't in our circumstance, but they want to make those changes. Okay. So they're going to read Sellership. They're going to read Pluck the FUD. What 3 things can they do today when they get off this podcast? There are 3 actions that they can take to start to effectively make those changes. So it takes them from point A, which they're dissatisfied with for whatever reason, whether it's their health, whether it's their income, whether it's their whatever, and to get to point B, which is a preferable place and destination for them.
Oh man, I have the goosies right now. Feeling very, very emotional, grateful for this chance to be with you right now to share what I'm about to say, because I'm gonna let you in on a secret that's been just absolute game changer for me. And the secret is in this little black box. Secret is in this little black box right here. And this is something that you can do. I attribute this. So let me just pull one of these out. I have mixed in here quotes, poems. Some of them are spiritual. Some of them are just, this one here is, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. And there's a little poem that's there, man. Okay. So let me stop stalling and tell you. So to answer that question, there's one more piece. It's amazing that you asked that, because Brian Tracy asked me when I asked him what's his number one advice, he told me those things: continue to learn, don't quit. And before he got out of the car, he said, you know what? I asked Jim Rohn, my mentor. Brian was mentored by Jim Rohn. I asked Jim Rohn the same question, and this is what he told me. He said, you've got to stand guard at the door of your mind. And I remember Jim, I've listened to his books and heard him say that, but that's advice he gave to Brian. And so Brian, in fact, my book, Pluck the FUD, chapter 10 is called Stand Guard. And your question to me is, this is what I've learned. How do I stand guard? And what I've learned is you stand guard by, you get rid of the FUD, you pluck it out, but you've got to plant intentional thought into your brain. This is how you take an idea, a quote, a thought, you write it down and you commit to memory. You put it in your brain and you plant very intentional thought, so that when the world tells you you can't, you've already hacked your brain and you're flying in the direction of what it is that you want. That you're so busy sprinting towards what you want, you don't even hear them tell you why you can't do it. You want to plant intentional thought. This has been absolute magic. Something you can do right now to pluck the FUD, plant intentional, give yourself a kick in the reticular activating system, a kick in the RAS, by incorporating your own little thing where what's important to you, and write it down, put it into your brain. Don't let anybody fill your brain with things that are unintentional of why you can't succeed. Fill it with all the reasons why you can succeed.
Wow. Love it. Love it. Golden stuff. This stuff's golden. Another question. I call this, 120001. Let me give you a little backup on this.
Okay. I'm tuned in. I'm excited. I'm interested about this one.
I've interviewed 2 people, and I won't mention them right now. Folks, you can go back and listen to the interviews. No, I won't tell you their names. One is famous, and the other is a very successful distributor in our industry. And they're both people in great leadership positions. And if you met either one of these people, because I've met them both over Zoom, never met them personally, but I know of both of their work. And both of them had contemplated ending their lives at one point. Doesn't get more profound than that decision, right? And they both referenced, the one lady was heading down a highway in Nebraska and Her daughter had been murdered, and her boss had not allowed her, Ben, believe it or not, to go to the trial of the dirtbag that had killed her daughter. And she had a regular job at that time. And she said, you know what, my life is just a mess, lost my daughter. And she ran down the highway, and there's two semis on each side of her. And she's thinking, I'm out of here. And she looks in the rearview mirror, and she sees a family in an SUV behind her. And she's like, well, wait a minute. I kill me, I kill them. That's not fair. That's not right. And she made the great decision not to do that. The other gentleman lost $1 million back about 30 years ago in a real estate deal in California, and had contemplated the same thing. Had access to a handgun and thought, hey, you know what? I'll solve my wife and my kids' problems. I'm out of here. And both of those people told me about 120001, and they told me about it in different ways. And here's what it is, Ben, and our listeners. And I'm bringing this up for a reason, because I got a question for you, because you train so many people and you influence so many people and you're such a profound leader in what you do. Okay. So 12001 means tomorrow's a new day, right? And if you think about all the programs, whether it's to stop drinking, stop smoking, stop gambling, stop overeating, stop oversexing, stop over, I don't know, how many other things are there? I mean, if you think about it, all of them are predicated on make it through today. One more day, make it through today, right? And, give us this day our daily bread, right? Not tomorrow's. Let me get through this, right? So it's biblical. It is profound. Ben, you've trained thousands of people. You've helped thousands of people. The person out there who isn't making hopefully any kind of serious life decision like we're talking about, like those two individuals were, but maybe they're just saying, I've had it. We've had COVID. We've got a bad economy. We've got this circumstance. We've got that circumstance. We've got a war going on, all these things. And I've had it. I don't know which end is up. They pluck the FUD, like you just talked about, but how do they pluck the FUD on steroids? How do they do that today? Because some people can take measurable, hey, I'll take incremental steps, right? I got the time, I got the luxury, maybe I got money in the bank, I got a roof over my head, I got food in the refrigerator. So I'm okay today. What about that guy or that gal or that couple who's sitting out there listening to us and saying, hey, what Ben's talking about is great, what John's talking about is great, but man, hey, I got 30 days of money left, or I got a week's money left. How do I take that action today?
I love it. I'll just have to answer that by chapter 8 in Pluck the FUD. So every chapters 2 through 10 are all about strategies on how to actually get rid of the real weeds. These weeds are real, like real life. Like life is hard, right? Like life can be challenging. And like, how do you get rid of these? Chapter 8 is the 3 W's, stronger than fear. Sorry, bad example. I don't have my biceps aren't very strong. So that's like bad example, but like stronger than fear. Like, what is it that you can engage that's stronger than any fear that we experience or any of the realness of life? Your will, your why, and your way. The will, why, way. And let me just share this. So our human will, in fact, it reminds me of a poem. In fact, it's a poem that I memorized in here. I'm gonna give it to you off the top of my head right now. It's something I memorized 15, 20 years ago. I was in the trenches and it's never left me. We'll see the test right now, because I haven't thought about this in a little while. But the human will is so powerful, and we're up against real obstacles in our life. Check this out, John. You will be what you will to be. Let failure find that false content in that poor word environment, but spirit scorns and it is free. It masters time. It conquers space. It cows the boastful trickster chance and bids the tyrant circumstance uncrown and fill a servant's place. The human will, that force unseen, can hew away to any goal. The walls of granite intervene. Be not impatient in delay, but wait as one who understands. When spirit rises and commands, the gods are ready to obey. And what I love about that poem, the reason I had to have that in my brain to stand guard in my own world, was you will be what you will to be. How bad do you want it? What do you want? How bad are you pushing for it? Because if your why is strong enough, if your will is strong enough, you can overcome anything. You can overcome any obstacle. And so stronger, the 3 W's stronger than fear, your will, the human spirit, the human will. Where there's a will, there's a way, right? The human spirit, your why, anchoring, what gets you up out of bed in the morning? Why should anybody care? As Simon Sinek has trained the world on. And your way is the way that you see the challenges in your life, the way that you see the obstacles. Is life happening to you, or is life happening for you? And I choose to believe that right now with my stage 3 cancer, life is happening for me. It's forcing me to bring my kids closer and love them even more. It's forcing me to really reflect on what am I spending my time doing, because this time is precious. It's your will, your why, your way. What way do you interpret the obstacles and challenges? Because I've learned one thing in my life: the obstacle is the way, and behind a mountain of challenges is more challenges in life that'll change, and thus the obstacle is the way to new growth. So I just that was kind of a lot, maybe a little bit heavy there, but man, your will, your why, and your way stronger than fear.
Will, why, way. The 3 W's. That could be a book in itself.
Yes, sir. And you'll see it in chapter 8 of Pluck the FUD.
Chapter 8, Pluck the FUD. So let's go back for a second here. Okay. 2 things on this. Number 1, you mentioned Jim Rohn. I'll give you a fast Jim Rohn story. Let you catch your breath. So I worked for a company here in Dallas where I was vice president of this company for a couple of years. And one of the guys that I worked with had actually been the co-author of The Seasons of Life. So he comes into my office one day and he says to me, "Hey, you want to have lunch with Jim?" "Sure." "Jim who?" He goes, "Yeah, Jim." He goes, "Rohn, he's in town." I go, "Wait a minute. Jim Rohn wants to have lunch with me?" He goes, "Well, he doesn't know you're coming." He goes, "But he's going to have lunch with me and Charlie, who owned the company," right? So we go to this restaurant here, not too far from where I'm talking to you right now in Richardson, Texas. And we go and we sit down with Rohn and we eat lunch. And we're just talking guy talk. We're probably talking about sports or something. I don't even remember what we're talking about. Finally, I'm about 34, 35 at the time. These 2 other guys were in their 50s already. Matter of fact, I think Ron was probably in his 60s even. And he looks at them and he looks at me and he says, "It's too late for these guys. Not too late for you." I'm like, "Oh, man." I said, "Excuse me 1 second. You would have thought I was Usain Bolt." I picked up my car keys. I ran to my car to get my journal because I knew how religious he was about taking notes. And we're sitting there. I bring my journal back in. And he was referring to 2 other guys, even though they were his friends and colleagues for many years, one guy in particular. And anyway, he was kind of chastising them because they weren't taking notes, which was unusual because they really did most of the time, honestly. But if hey, casual lunch, 4 guys, we're going to sit around and talk about last night's ball game or whatever event was taking place at that time. And I'll never forget this, Ben, that lesson about, once again, what you put on paper gets into the mind. And he believed that, So here he is, your mentor's mentor. Okay. And he's also my mentor's mentor, Larry Thompson. Okay. He's also Tony Robbins' mentor, the guy who's done pretty good. Okay. and there's 3 guys, right, that have done exceedingly well, right? And thousands of others. But anyway, to that point. Okay. Back to how we learn, because today there's so much information and there's so many voices, right? And the person listening who says, "Hey, this is an applied science. They got some strategy now. They got the 3 W's, okay? So one point that they're going to get from Pluck the FUD that they're not going to get anywhere else in anything that they read or hear today would be what?
The easy part in achieving success is learning the skills. to be successfum, they're duplicatable. You can figure out, how to position your sentence. You can figure out, the going up, you don't want to go up at the end of the sentence. You want to go down. You can learn the skills of communication. You can learn the secrets of closing. You can learn all of those the skills to super achieve in your field. You can learn the paperwork and how to do it in a way that's quick and easy. The easy part is learning the skills. The hard part, the really real challenge to achieving high performance, is learning to guard your mind and taking action despite inevitable fear. And so you've got, like, my best advice that I could give to anybody is you've got to pluck the FUD. You got to get rid of the fear, the uncertainty, and the doubt that will hold you back from becoming your best. And when you pluck that FUD, when you pull that weed out of your brain, there's an empty space that you've got to decide, what am I going to fill it with? Because you could pluck FUD out and then just let anything enter your mind, and anything will just enter your mind. But you want to plant intentional thoughts like this. And I talk about this in the book, and I go into more detail of it as well. But you want to plant intentional thoughts, and you're not going to hear from anywhere on the planet. It's original. Pluck the FUD, plant intention, give yourself a kick in the RAS, what it is that you want. It's a 3-part little formula: pluck FUD, plant intentional, kick in the RAS, to focus and fixate on what you want rather than naturally focus and fixating on what you don't want.
Got it. Love it. Hey, pick up that little box again for a second.
Yeah.
Open that thing up. Now, folks, that looks like, on the surface, just a little box with some index cards. Okay. And let me give you what that really is. I love your thoughts on this, Ben.
Yeah.
Picasso sitting in a park in New York City a number of years ago. A lady comes up to him and says, "Oh, Mr. Picasso, I love your work. Would you do a drawing of me?" And she says, "Sure." She says, "Sit down," and he does a pencil drawing of her, hands it to her. She says, "Oh my God, it's beautiful." And he says, "Oh, by the way, that'd be $5,000. And $5,000, I don't know what year we're talking about, but it's a while ago. So 5,000, I don't know, probably 25,000, maybe 50,000 today. A lot of money, right? And she says, "Oh my God, it's so beautiful." And, it's Picasso that did the painting for her, right? And she says, "But it only took you 5 minutes." He says, "No, it took me a lifetime." What's in that little box there, folks? That's a lifetime of Ben Ward. That's a lifetime of his experience and others' experiences. The Brian Tracy's, the Jim Rohns, some of these, Tom Hopkins, all the other names that you've heard, maybe that are familiar to you. Hopefully they're familiar to you. Maybe they're not. And probably people maybe that you never heard of. Because I'll go back to that lunch with Jim Rohn. The one time in my life I had the opportunity to spend time with Jim Rohn. So Jim looks back at me and he says, "John," he says, "let me tell you something." He said, "You think I'm going to say something really important?" He goes, "And I probably will." He goes, "But what if the waiter says something life-changing and walks away? Are you going to remember it tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Nope." "You going to remember the waiter's name tomorrow?" "Nope." "You going to remember the restaurant's name tomorrow?" "Probably." Okay. But that's the way that you think, that I admire so much. It's the way that our friend Dan McCormick thinks. It's the way that some of the other leaders that I've had on the show think, is like, wait a minute, I can't know it all, right? To Brian's point, continue learning. Those notes are your learning. When you're gone to the next life, your kids are going to go through your notes. They're not going to care about your sofa or your television set or your computer. They're going to care about those notes, because the notes are who you became. So folks, keep good notes.
I love that. It makes me think of something else as well with that, John. I think even another key nugget is so you went and got your journal, and Jim's like, "Hey, it's not even the things that I'm going to say. I'll say some good stuff." But what I've found is that capturing bursts of thought of your own thoughts. So somebody, you might be at a train, you might be listening to this right now, hearing John share that incredible story of him and Jim Rohn and some of the things that we're talking about and Pluck the FUD. Okay, cool. Like, and way more valuable to you, my friend, is a burst of thought that you have that's relative to what's important to you in your life, that might come out of nowhere. It might not be related to what we're talking about, but it is 100% related to what you need for you to achieve, to become your very best. So capturing bursts of thought has been something I've been obsessed with personally, to capture bursts of thought, write them down, and take action on things that are going to move the needle. And those will come intuitively, innately from your heart, from your mind, from maybe outside, call it God, call it the universe. But I challenge you to also not only take notes. We call it, every time I do a keynote, I always talk about note taking and note making. And this is what I tell people. I'm going to tell you right now. So like right here, this is just a random page. Boom. Notice right here, I have note taking and note making. So I do a line on like every page, virtually every page of my notebook where I'll throw a line down the middle, and I'm just looking through and like, so here's a random page, boom, line. These are the note making. This is note taking. This is note making. And the note making, I challenge you to put a line across your page, your notes, and that way you can easily sort through. These are the action items that have come to me that I'm going to do as a result of whatever it is I'm pursuing. That's the note making. And then note taking is taking John's wisdom, things you hear from others, and take some rad notes, and then make your own notes of things that are just powerful for you.
Well, you know what that is? That's the action step, right? I go back to what Ben Gay told me that Dr. Hill told him, right? Because he said integrity in all things, focus in all things, and action is the most important of all those three things. That's the actions. I never thought of it that way. Note making versus note taking. So folks, 61 years old, I'm not too old to learn a new concept, which I just learned today, and so did you. And that's right, because we all take notes. What are we going to do with those notes is what the note making is. Brilliant. Wow. Man, I hate to ever end this interview because I got to get my notes here myself. So let's wrap up, but I want to give you the last word. I got to do one quick thing. Okay, I got to run my commercial. Okay, because my wife gets mad at me if I don't. Okay, which your wife probably does too, because we got books that we want to market too. Obviously, Leave Nothing to Chance, which is also the name of our show. Leaving Nothing to Chance, the name of the show technically, but anyway, Leave Nothing to Chance, and also Moving Up 2020. And I wrote those books, Ben, much for the same reason that you wrote your books, which was to help people. And what an amazing process it is, because, I've interviewed now, you're probably the 15th or 20th person I've somewhere in that vicinity that's written one book or more. Because, right, most of the time we go, I'm doing this once. And then next thing you know, oh, yeah, I got another idea. You know how that works. But in the writing process, right, you've been inspired to do this because you feel like it's part of your legacy. Let's talk about that for a minute. Legacy is important, okay? 50 years from now, when your grandkids say, who was my grandfather? What mark did he leave on the world?
What's important to me, I want my kids, I want them to know and feel and experience that they mattered to me. And they mattered to me. And I want them to read, I want my grandkids 50 years to read Sellership and have a sense for my heart, have a sense, and they'll get a bunch of tools, some really good tools on leadership. Pluck the FUD, I've dedicated it to my three kids, Miley, McKay, and Emery, because I want them to have the courage to go after their dreams and pluck FUD out of their own life and take action. And I want them to know from me on a personal level that they mattered to me and they felt it, they experienced it. And I was inspired to go into work and care enough about them to not overwork and to not forget who they are in the process of me becoming what I'm trying to become in my life. But I want them to know that they matter. And my grandkids 50 years from now, I want them to feel like they know me because I've written and I've shared stories through these books and videos, through my YouTube channel. I throw ideas and videos out. I want them to feel from my heart that I was doing this for them. I see them, and for the world, for those that need it. But I want them to know that they matter at a deep, profound level, that they matter as a human being, their existence, that they matter to me, and they're loved by their grandpa or their dad.
Great. Well, Ben, this has been a privilege. It's been a pleasure. And folks, pluck the FUD, because you heard it from the man himself. I can't say it any better than he can. Okay. It's getting rid of all that stuff. And you know what? The last few years, no matter how positive a person you are, we've all had this stuff that the world has thrown at all of us cumulatively that we have to get past. We got to get rid of it. Okay. And we got to move forward. So Ben, the last word is yours. Go ahead.
John, I think your shirt says it. It says, leave nothing to chance. Get clear on what you want and go after it. Push towards your dreams. Pluck the FUD, plant intention, give yourself a kick in the rass of what you want. Don't leave it to chance what goes into your brain. Fill it with intentional thoughts. And as you do, you'll continue to enjoy fulfillment, along with a lot of trials and challenges on the way towards what you're pursuing. But you're an incredible human being, John. It's been wonderful being with you. Thank you.
Well, likewise. Thank you so much, Ben. Hey, Ben, you know what? We forgot one thing. Where can they get Pluck the FUD?
Yeah, so you can pick up Pluck the FUD just straight on my website, benward.com.
Simple enough. benward.com. Here we go.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Soliter, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.